Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 common mistakes that new overlanders make. So if you are new to overlanding and you want to kind of avoid some of the pitfalls and things like that, then this should be a good episode for you. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, I do stuff like this all the time. There's a once a week vlog / podcast. It's out on all the major podcast channels and it's on YouTube. So if you aren't subscribed, make sure to subscribe or add it to your favorites wherever you'd like. I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and there's going to be a ton of awesome info for you on this channel. So without further ado, let's get into 5 common mistakes that new overlanders typically make when getting started in overlanding.
Understand where it came from, but you got it, my got it. It began in the land of the sandstorm. I fought it, though I wanted everything to do with what you give to me. Loosening my grip.
All right, so as I mentioned in the intro, today I'm talking about 5 common mistakes that new overlanders make when they get started in overlanding. And a lot of these I've done myself, and that's where I kind of learned about them and why I consider them mistakes. Definitely not trying to call anybody else out here, not citing anyone specifically except myself and the things that I've done wrong over the years. So let's start with number 1. The first thing that I wanted to talk about that is a very common mistake is building your rig without actually putting a ton of thought into it and just kind of buying into the media hype. Now, what I mean by this is, I'll give you the perfect example. My first overlanding rig was a 2005 Nissan Xterra. Bought the thing bone stock. Before I had even bought it, though, I was that confident that I was going to be getting an Xterra of some kind that I had bought wheels, tires, a lift for it, and I had bought a number of pieces of camping gear for it already before I even found the vehicle. Now, obviously, that's kind of a dumb idea because what if something would have happened? What if I ended up not being able to buy that? What if we found out we were having a baby and we needed a minivan and I couldn't even buy a truck? Obviously dumb, but a lot of people don't necessarily, they're not that crazy and they're not going to do that. But a lot of people will get that vehicle and they will immediately go to YouTube and start watching videos and be like, I like the way that guy's truck looks. I like the way that girl's truck looks. And they will start to build a list in their mind, or even sometimes, and I've done this myself, they'll build a spreadsheet of, things that they want to buy, mods that they want to make to their vehicle. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that if you do it before you put any thought into it, before you go on any trips, you're not necessarily going to know what you need. You might think you know what you need, or you might think you know what you want, but then you go out on those trips and maybe you focused a ton on armor and skid plates and bumpers so that you could put a winch in, and you wanted to do all this stuff, but maybe where you are located, there's just not that much wheeling. Maybe it's all just gravel fire roads or things like that. Or then you add all that weight to your vehicle. Maybe you have made it look awesome, but then your suspension is overloaded and stressed and you're bottoming out all the time and potentially causing damage to your vehicle because you went too far too fast before you knew what your actual needs were and you bought things that you didn't really end up needing. That is what happened with my Xterra. I bought really cheap suspension because I wanted to get everything up front. And then I rode it for a couple of years and I really didn't like it. It was, my upper coil buckets were contacting with my upper control arms. It was clunking everywhere that I went. And it just wasn't a great situation. So I ended up switching that out and going to real, good name brand suspension later on. But so don't start building your truck the minute that you get it or even before you get it. Don't start making spreadsheets and things like that. I mean, again, planning ahead is great, right? And I don't want to deter you from that. I just want you to, before you buy it, you can build the lists and stuff. That's a ton of fun. I enjoyed building my truck mentally and on a spreadsheet before I ever actually built the truck. The difference is then I went out and I bought all that stuff before I even went on a trip. I had lifted the truck, put new wheels and tires on it. I put ATs on it. And then later on, I'm like, I should have gone with like a hybrid RT tire or maybe even an MT because I do like to wheel and I live near Kentucky and the Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway. But I had already bought AT tires. So then it was going to be a big expense to upgrade, right? So just think through the stuff, then go on a few trips. 3 to 5 trips minimum, right? Like go out, take some trips, and then you'll learn where your priorities should lay. Maybe you go out and you buy a huge kitchen thing because you think you're going to cook all the time, but then you get in the woods and the bugs are biting you and you're like, I don't like to cook. I just want to bring like a fast meal, like a sandwich or something like that. Now you've spent all this money, you've set up your vehicle for cooking, and now you don't want to cook. So you see where the problems can come in. Okay, so number 2. Overbuilding your rig, period. And I kind of almost touched on this in the first bullet point there, but it's very tempting to, again, look at social media, look at Instagram, look at YouTube, see all these massively huge built trucks. I'll give you a great example from my own personal experience again. When I went for my Xterra that I had tried to build up into a big old monster Xterra, I went to a Frontier that was what they call Titan swapped, had, the full size Nissan Titan truck suspension underneath of it, about a 6-inch lift on it, and 35-inch tires. And the fenders were all cut to make all that fit and stuff, but it had a ton of modifications, which as a result, some of those modifications ended up causing problems with the vehicle, and it proved to be very unreliable for me until I fixed all the stuff on it. So with that being said, again, don't overbuild your rig, right? That kind of ties back into where are you located? What kind of trips do you like to take? If you're a big wheeler that's starting to get into overlanding, it might make a ton of sense for you to overbuild your rig. I'll give you a good example. A buddy of mine, his YouTube channel is called Adventure Further. He has these giant Jeeps on like 40s, 43s, just huge, massive tires, custom built axles, suspension, everything, right? And they're amazing vehicles. But he comes from the wheeling world. He was a wheeler first, and now he's getting into overlanding. So for him, he likes to go out west. He likes to go hit Moab and hit those big rock climbing stuff. He likes to go wheeling hard and actually put his vehicles to the test. I'm in the middle probably. Then there are the people on the other end of the spectrum that will avoid, any sort of challenge at all costs. Kind of the smarter overlanding way, the way that overlanding started, right? If you had to get 100 miles out into the backcountry in Australia, you didn't want to take any chances on getting stuck or potentially breaking down hundreds of miles from civilization, right? In the US, it's kind of difficult to get that far from civilization. So I like to be in the middle somewhere. I kind of lean towards like the Ozarks, that kind of wheeling, or Kentucky, where there is some challenging stuff. There is a chance of body damage. It is a little bit more fun and a little bit more difficult, but it's not as likely to damage your vehicle. You don't have to have a super fully built rig. For example, I've got my 2023 Nissan Frontier. It's on a small 1.5 to 2 inch lift from All Dogs Off-Road, and it's on 33-inch tires. So it's a pretty mild build as far as builds go. But it has a rooftop tent. I have an awning on it. I have a bed rack. I have a drawer system. I have a fridge built in. I have a dual battery system. So for like going out for a long time and being remote and being able to be self-sufficient and self-reliant, it's perfect for me. But again, it took me 3 rigs to get here, right? Like I bought a totally stock Xterra, and I built the crap out of it, but the cheap way. I made a lot of mistakes. I spent a lot of dumb money on things that weren't great modifications for the vehicle. Then I bought a really, really super modified vehicle that was already built, had some problems with that because the previous owner didn't take great care of it, and there were some badly made modifications to it that ended up causing problems down the road. And so then with this one, that's what you can literally see the trajectory, right? Then I went to a brand new truck that I'm the only owner of. I don't have to worry about any previous owner's issues or anything like that. And I got to start from scratch. And what did I do? I actually went back. I went way smaller on this build than I've been on any other ones. But I tell you what, I've taken it to a few of the places that I've taken those previous trucks, and it has done 95% as well as those trucks did. Now, granted, the old Frontier is super capable. I would definitely get some body damage on some of the stuff that I've done in the old truck if I did it in the new truck, but I'm just not going to do those obstacles, right? Those are above my normal level. I pushed the limits with the old truck because it was so capable. But really, this thing will do 95% of the stuff I want to do with a very slight lift and just a bump from 32 to 33-inch tires. It's gained me enough clearance that I can do most of the things that I've done in the previously more built trucks. Okay, so part number 3. Ignoring recovery and safety gear in favor of cooler gear. Now, what I mean by this is, when I started, again, all this is coming from things that I've learned, right? When I started, I heard from many people, you need a recovery strap, you need recovery points, you need some sort of a bumper or some sort of a recovery point on the front and back. So when I first started, of course, I was super excited, right? And I wanted to get the lift, and I wanted the bigger tires, and I wanted to build this big monster truck Xterra because it looked cool, and I'd seen other people with cool Xterras. So I went for all the big mods first. I went for all the camping mods first. I really wanted a rooftop tent and all that stuff, but I did that at my peril because then I didn't have enough recovery gear. Now, to my credit, one thing that I did do right is my background had kind of been off-roading. I'd been to off-road parks and things like that. That's what kind of got me into it. And then I made the connection later on that, hey, I also like camping. Why not do both, right? So I did have a lot of the camping gear. I didn't have to buy a lot of stuff. And so that made a little bit more sense. But as a result, I also took my Xterra out. And the first thing I did was go to Attica and go to the Badlands, which is a off-road park here in Indiana that's a lot of fun. So I went up there and I did test the rig. I learned a lot about the rig. I got to, sort of see what it's capable of in its stock form. Well, in its 2.5-inch lifted with 33s form, because I did that again as soon as I got the truck. But in its mostly stock form, before I loaded it up with gear and put a rooftop tent on it and stuff, I went and wheeled it just to kind of learn about it. But that did kind of tell me, hey, you definitely do need some recovery points. You definitely do need this stuff. Now, again, I went cheap on my first build. I just bought like a stock OEM recovery hook. And made it so that I had 2 on the front of the Xterra, and then I bought one of those hitch-mounted D-rings, which is an okay option if that's all you got. for the rear of the truck. And I did that stuff, but I didn't get a winch for a really long time, like 2 years probably. And, I did take some trips where I was like, I might get stuck here and I might not be able to recover this truck. So again, it's just very important to think about safety, first aid kits, recovery gear, that kind of thing. While it's not as sexy and it's not as fun as buying a bunch of knives or really cool backpacks or, a rooftop tent or that kind of thing, those are more important. It's more important to be prepared and have first aid, to have, good recovery gear, good recovery points and things like that than it is to focus on the cool stuff. So again, just take that with a grain of salt. I'm not telling you not to get cool stuff, but I'm just saying make sure that you are covered from a safety and recovery standpoint before you go nuts buying a bunch of other gear. All right, so part number 4, buying cheap gear just because it's cheap. And I'll give you some examples of this. So again, when I started, did not have a ton of money. I was super cheap. I had bought my truck for a really good deal. And I'd spent a portion of my budget that I had allocated for the truck on the lift and the tires and all that stuff. So a lot of my money was gone right when I first got the truck. So as a result, my brain said, and I've made videos to this effect and stuff years ago. And so I'm not recanting what I said, but I am learning a little bit and adjusting based on 5-6 years of doing this now. But I bought just the cheapest possible gear thinking if I get these ditch lights on Amazon that are no-name brand and they're $30 for a pair of them and I mount them to the truck with a piece of steel that I bend myself and I drill with my drill press and I mount them to my fender bolts that are already in existence and I just make it work, then that gives me more money for other gear. And that was kind of where my head went, was if I just buy the cheapest possible stuff, then I can get more gear, right? I can have all the things if I just buy really cheap. Again, over the years, I've seen that there are certain categories where that works, and then there are certain categories where it really doesn't. I'll give you some examples of that, and I've heard this from a couple of people now that are very smart, way smarter than me, and I really like this thought. And they said, basically, if it touches your body, that's where you want to spend more money. So clothing is very important, right? So if you're going out in the winter, which is what I do a lot, you don't want to just buy a $10 pair of sweatpants from Walmart and some jeans and go out in negative 10-degree weather. You're going to freeze to death, and you're not going to have a good time. So spend the money on your clothes, spend the money on your bedding, spend the money on your mattress, spend the money on the pillow. That stuff is important. Same with rooftop tents to a degree. I mean, you're going to lay in it, you're going to sleep in it, but things have gone a little wild now. There are a lot of rooftop tents out there that are really good and really inexpensive. So, I've had several rooftop tents. I've had them ranging from about $1,000 up to about $2,800. And in that range, I've really been surprised to see a lot of them that are in like the $1,500 to $2,000 range are just as nice and sometimes nicer than the more expensive one. I'll give you an example. This one up here right now is my open road rooftop tent. That's the big boy. They're kind of top of the line one, but they also have another one that's the LT trim. That's like the slightly lower trim. It doesn't have crossbars and there's basically just a few little differences, but it's mostly the same tent. That thing's under $2,000. And it is a hard shell, clamshell style with the extra X hinge at the bottom. So instead of just opening like a clamshell, it actually lifts up too, which gives you more headroom on the headroom side, and it gives you more footroom at the other side. My old Nature Nest was also a great tent. Now that one is a true clamshell, so your feet are kind of crammed into a wedge, which is part of why I upgraded to this, because I wanted more room. I'm a tall guy, I'm a little over 6 foot, so I just got tired of kind of cramming my feet into the bottom, and I switched to this one. But again, that's still though, you also don't want to go out and buy the literal cheapest one that you can find. You don't want to buy the no-name brand one that's not going to have any support, that's going to arrive damaged, and you're not going to have any recourse, because then you've still spent a pretty significant amount of money, maybe at the bottom $1,000. And you might have a tent that's damaged and you can't get anything fixed on it. Now you've lost $1,000 and you still have to go buy another tent. So again, things that touch your body, things that you sleep in, that kind of thing, more important. When it comes to electronics and stuff, that's where I tend to go cheap. If I'm buying like flashlights and things like that, and I'll put links in the description down below to some of this stuff that I'm talking about, but like I bought some really cheap, like a 2-pack of really nice LED rechargeable flashlights for like $20-$30, and they've lasted me for 5 or 6 years, and they're awesome. I keep them in my drawers all the time. They've got a floodlight and a spotlight, so you can kind of use them around camp. I use them in my drawers as drawer lights when I'm not using them around camp. So I mean, like that kind of stuff, flashlights, not a big deal. Toilets, it's a plastic thing that you sit on, right? Of a 5-gallon bucket with a seat. So, there's certain things that you do want to spend the money on, and there's certain things that you don't. Lighting is another one that you can spend up to $700 or $800 for a pair of ditch lights, or you can spend $30 for a pair of ditch lights. I tend to go in about the $100 to $200 range for my ditch lights and go with something like a Novesight or a Co-Light or an Oxbeam, those established middle of the road names. So anyways, don't just buy cheap to buy cheap. Okay, and then fifth and final, and I have done this still to this day, I still kind of do this, and I have to pull myself back all the time. When you get ready for a big trip, Okay, so now keep in mind, I'm talking about overlanding trips here, right? There are a lot of us like me will do like, this is going to be a quick overnight trip. While I'm recording this video, I'm here for the night. I'm not calling that an overlanding trip. I don't get super excited and go out and buy a bunch of gear for that. But a year ago, I went to Wyoming. I was going to be gone for 2 weeks. Huge trip. I'm driving 20 plus hours out and 20 plus hours back. It was going to be an exhausting trip. I spent probably $500 on just random gear and stuff that I thought I would need right before I went on that trip. I was sitting there, I was researching, I was watching other videos on it. I was buying, head bug net things that I thought I might need if there were bugs. I bought new jerry cans. I bought all this stuff just to prep for this trip. And I feel like a lot of us, when we get to this, like when you take your first real overlanding trip, right? You're kind of like, this is it. I'm going for 3, 4, or 5 days. I'm going for a full week. I'm going for 2 weeks or a month, right? Whatever, however long it is. When it's more than a 1 or 2 night trip, it can get very tempting to just go nuts and buy a whole bunch of stuff so that you're really prepared or over prepared for your trip. So again, just be thoughtful about that, right? If you know you're going into bug country, like the real reason that I bought the head net originally was we were supposed to go to Canada and we'd heard that the bugs were just atrocious. Then we ended up going to Wyoming, never even opened the thing, never even used it, 20 bucks down the drain, never even touched it. So that's kind of where I'm going though, is if you need something, of course, buy it. I'm not saying it's going to pour down rain, don't buy a raincoat, right? But I'm just saying, don't get so excited and caught up in it that you go and buy stuff that you probably don't need and you kind of know it, but you just want to buy the things because you saw it in another video or because you're going on this trip, it feels special and you want to get all the cool gear. All right, so that is going to do it for the 5 common mistakes that new overlanders make. Again, if you're new to overlanding, I hope that that was helpful for you. If it was and you're on YouTube, click that like button down below. That helps a ton, shows other people that this video was helpful. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure to click that subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when new videos drop. Like I said, I do one every single week of this style. And then there's a ton of just different gear things, do-it-yourself modifications. Again, I own a Nissan Frontier and I've owned multiple Nissan trucks. So I do a fair amount of Nissan stuff too. So whether you're Nissan or not though, there's a ton of value here for you, and I'd love to have you as a subscriber. In the description down below will be links to all my social channels, so wherever you want to come hang out, I'd love to have you. There's also a link to my website where I've got funny overlanding, camping themed patches and stickers, dad joke type stuff, right? Don't burn your wiener, it's a hot dog, weekend warrior with a jerry can, that kind of thing. Check those out down below. Another thing on YouTube is that there's a join button. You can click on that. It's kind of just a nice passive way to support the channel. It's about $7 a month, but it gets you early access to a lot of the videos, gets you some other perks and things like that. If you're just enjoying the content, you want to kind of say, hey, thanks, I'd like to support your channel and keep you making that content, that's a way to do it. Then below that is a link to my Patreon page. That's a little more active. We have a 24/7 Discord. We all hang out. We talk all the time. We do a once a month Zoom call, and we do a couple trips every year. So again, tons and tons of fun, but if you want to be more hands-on, then that's the way to do it. And then last but not least, there's the Newbie Overlanders Facebook page, totally free to join, over 15,000 members in it at the time I'm recording this, and it's growing every day. It's just a ton of fun. It's different from the big groups because there's no bullying or anything like that. So if that sounds good to you, and especially if you're newer to overlanding, definitely consider joining that. But again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.